Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or as we like to say here at Shady Acres Woodshop, howdy. Today we have a piece of Modesto ash sent to us from Tuffy Marginez. This was tucked in a box with some other pieces of wood. Looks pretty nice, doesn't it? You see some vaulting in there. Looks really good. Some bark inclusions. This piece is 12 inches long, about 6 inches wide, and about 4 inches high. But then again, it depends on where you measure it. Yeah, there's the problem, isn't it? I think Tuffy's testing us again. This is going to be an odd one. You can see here I've measured and found the center of the piece and poked a little hole there, and I'm about to drill a hole for my woodworm screw. The problem with that is this feels a little soft, a little punky. I'm not sure. I think what I'm going to do is drill the hole and put some CA in there to harden it up a little bit before I screw it onto the threads of the woodworm screw. So let me get that hole drilled. We'll get it over here to the lathe and see if we can't get it mounted up. Stand by. I just don't know if this is going to hold or not. I think not, and that'll be a shame. Well, it's seated all the way along the front of the jaws, but I feel like if I tighten it any more, it's just going to strip out. So I don't know. We'll have to see how the tailstock live center fits up there. Looks like it's going to land right on that point. Now I'm going to spin it up a little bit, as I like to do when I'm tightening up the live center. That helps it find its real center. Yeah, I can probably live with that. Now you might be wondering why I've left it 12 inches long when it's only 6 inches wide. I do it because design opportunities happen as I'm going along, and I don't want to miss anything. So I like to leave as much of the piece as I can, even though I'm going to waste away much of it. And then we've got this big crack. This whole thing here is going to go peeling off of there any minute now. But, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained, that's for darn sure. I'll get my mask and face shield on. I'm going to sharpen up my 5/8 inch standard grind bowl gouge, and we'll get at it. 540 RPM. Just trying to get a wide enough area so that I can make a tenon. But I think for now I'm going to move over here to the corner. I'm going to slow it down a little because of the woodworm screw. And I want to cut this little nub off of here so that I've got a nice flat surface to make a tenon on. So about 600. I could cut it off with a saw, but you know, I've got a chisel in my hand, not a saw. I like to run with this cone center on here, so I'm going to put that back on. Now I can flatten off the bottom a little more. Pick the speed back up about 700. And we'll just mark out our tenon size. And I'll leave that for now and just keep coming up the side here. That's probably all going to fall out of there. It comes right through the top side here too. Not necessarily a bad thing, just something to be aware of. You know, maybe we'll just go with a winged bowl with a huge hole in it. I know, it looks funny right now. Looks funny to me too. I know, not what you signed up for, is it? Well, at least I didn't charge you an admission fee. Sure would like to pick the speed up, but it's still out of balance. I'll try. Okay. About 1100. Well, you know what? I think we're ready to sand. I don't see anything else I can do. I've got a pretty good finish off the tool here. Sanding shouldn't be a real problem. The wood should sand easily because it's pretty soft. These jaggedy edges might give me a hard time as I would go along with the sanding, but the wood itself should sand pretty easily. So let me get my area cleaned up here and we'll get set up for sanding. I'm going to start the sanding with my Sandoflex. Sanding areas like this and like this. These points that are quite sharp, and this area. I fully expected this to fall out of here, and I haven't done anything to make it stay in. I haven't put any glue on it or anything. It might not fall out, so I'm going to sand it like that, and like that. I'll get my mask on here and show you how that's going to work. So that's what it's going to look like. Then I'll switch over to my 2-inch sanding disc. Probably sand in reverse at about 350. The Sandoflex is 180 grit to do in here. The 2-inch sanding disc, I'm starting with 80 grit and I'll work up through 400, and I'll bring you back when it's time to put some finish on here, whatever that's going to be. I'm not sure yet. See you in a bit. I often have to sand the piece to figure out what kind of finish I want to use, and that was certainly the case with this one. I kind of thought I was going to go with sanding sealer and shellac, but the more I thought about it and the more I sanded and experienced what I experienced doing the sanding, which was lots of catches on these peaky parts and on these cracky parts and that sort of thing. I wouldn't be able to spin the lathe fast enough and stick my fingers in there close enough to buff out in between coats like you have to do with sanding sealer and shellac. So I'm using Howard Feed and Wax because this has to be buffed out as well, but when I'm using sanding sealer and shellac, I've found that for me, I have to spin at 1,000 RPM or more, and then I have to jam the nylon abrasive cloth in here, and I just didn't see myself doing that. I found that lower RPMs just will not buff that stuff smooth. But this, on the other hand, I can buff it just like this, just by going quickly. So that was my determining factor in Howard Feed and Wax for this piece. Now that's not to take anything away from the Feed and Wax. Nothing. It's good stuff. I mean, look at how it brings out the grain. And it feels so wonderful when it's all buffed out and dry. It's so smooth, and you can feel the wood right through it. You can feel all the little nooks and crannies like we have here. And that's so important to me. What it feels like is just as important, if not more important, than what it looks like. Look at that. I mean, that's amazing stuff. So after I get this on everywhere, then I'll take a little brush and brush it into all these bark inclusions and areas I can't reach with a rag. So I've just put a little of the feed and wax in this little can. I'll just rub it in here good. And then the way I get it back out of these places is a nice clean toothbrush. Just buff it out with that. Okay, I'll let that dry for about a half hour, come back out, buff it up, and then it'll be time to turn it around and hollow it out, and that's when I'll bring you back. Later. The outside's finished. I've turned it around and mounted the tenon up in the chuck jaws. You can't see it, but there's a bark inclusion here, and it comes way back in here. So we're most likely going to run into that. I hope the bark inclusion stays in one piece and just shows on the inside. It could very well fall out of there and we'll have a huge hole. I don't know. I've sharpened up my 5/8 inch standard grind bowl gouge. I'm going to get my mask and face shield on and we're going to get to hollowing out this bowl. 1200 RPM. Yeah, I think we're there. By the time I scrape that, I'll do one more check, but I think that's it. Yeah, 1/4 inch. Yeah, it's good. We will scrape. It's time for sanding. What do you know? And I'm going to start the sanding with my Sandoflex. I'm going to sand all the bark. I'm going to sand the flat part of the top, but I'm going to only sand it gently. This is Tuffy's saw marks from where he sawed this piece of wood, and I like to leave those in as just part of the progression, part of the history of the piece. It'll feel smooth, it'll look good, but it'll also, you'll still be able to feel the texture of those saw cuts, and to me that's important. So that's what I'm going to do. And then I will, after I use my Sandoflex, just like I showed you before, just like that, sanding the bark and sanding the top surface. Like that. Then I'll switch over to my 2-inch sanding disc and sand the bowl part, just as I normally would. At about 350 RPM. Just like that. This will be 80 grit up through 400. This will be 180 grit on the bark areas. And that's as smooth as I go on the bark. And it's really quite smooth out after that. It doesn't really require any further sanding. And I'll bring it back when it's time to put some more finish on the top. Well, the sanding went as expected, really well, no issues, and it's just as smooth as a piece of wood like this can be. And that means not as smooth as some I've ever done. And that's because it's real soft, a little punky, like I mentioned. It's just not going to take a good hard finish. You know, it's just not. But that doesn't mean it's not going to look good. I think it's going to look great when it's all said and done here in just a few minutes. So I'm applying the Howard feed and wax just like I did on the outside. And then I'm going to take a little brush and brush all the bark and all of the little bark inclusions and holes and cracks and whatever. And then again, the way I get it out of these crevices and out of the bark and whatnot is a clean toothbrush. And I just brush it out of there quickly, kind of like I'm buffing it, and that works really well. So I'll bring you back here in a few minutes when it's time to turn around and take off the tenon. We're just about done. Don't go anywhere, it's gonna look cool. Okay, let's get that tenon off. I've mounted up a block of wood in my chuck. It's got a non-slip surface on it. I'm just gonna place the bowl over that and bring up my tailstock. I still have my center hole there for reference. I'm just gonna apply a little pressure, wiggle it around a little bit, make sure it feels like it's centered. And it feels like it. Then we'll bring up the tool rest. We'll spin it up to a little bit of speed and just hold my thumb up here. Make sure that it's hitting equally all the way around, and it is. I'll turn the speed up to about 600. A little more pressure. I'm going to take my 3/8 inch standard grind bowl gouge, which I just sharpened up, and we'll begin removing that tenon. Clearance is good, so I'm going to switch to a 3/8 inch swept back bowl gouge so that I can get in there a little tighter. And I'm also going to turn the speed down to about 400. So now I'm going to turn the speed down to 200 RPM, and I'm going to apply the bevel of the gouge against the bottom of the bowl. And I'm going to push pressure towards the headstock. Right hand on the gouge, left hand on the switch. And when the little nub stops turning, we'll know we're through. Like that. Then I'll just take it over here and sand it up on my workbench. Well, there it is, one Modesto Ash winged bowl. Is that what we're going to call it? Winged bowl, live edge, odd piece. What do you want to call this? Hole in it? Oh, I can't help it. I like it. There's a lot to see and do here. Lots to feel. There's the bottom all finished up. I suppose this would be the front. Hope you like it. Thank you, Tuffy Martinez, for sending this to us for all to enjoy. If you like this video, thumbs up please. I'd sure appreciate it. If you're a subscriber, thank you very kindly. I truly appreciate that. If you're not a subscriber, you might consider becoming one. I put out regular videos, about one a week, and I'd like to keep in touch. Your comments are always welcome, and I respond to all of them. So for now, this is Phil, Shady Acres Woodshop, signing off.